Welcome back, you podcaster. My name is Matt, and today we're talking about growing your podcast with 0 people paying attention. Today we're going to grow your audience, and I'm going to show you a trick that will 10 to 100x times the amount of people that are paying attention to you. Because if you can understand this very basic concept, well, then you've basically solved the riddle to traffic. It's actually quite simple. So we're going to take some notes here and we'll dive right in right now. So the first thing that people need to understand about podcasting or any piece of content that you're going to be generating, could be podcasts, could be videos, could be social media followings, anything like that, you're going to need a content engine. That's what I call it, at least. And what I mean by a content engine is that you need a method of producing content day after day, week after week, month after month. And if you were to look at some of the largest shows on the planet, either historically with TV shows or today's standards with like Joe Rogan or Call Her Daddy podcast, stuff like that, you will see that they actually are doing something called systematic or programmatic content, which basically means that they're using a very simple strategy to multiply their content out so that they always have something fresh to offer you. A lot of podcasters that I've come across struggle with what to produce next, what the next video idea is going to be, what's the next podcast idea, what's the next blog post. This kind of eliminates a lot of that, because if you can figure out what your niche is and turn it on its side, well then, again, you've solved the problem. Let's talk really quick about Crime Junkies. So Crime Junkie is a podcast that's been around for a while now. And what they do, and I've covered this before on the channel, is they basically discuss all the different murders or assaults or horrible shit that's happened over the years. They cover it on their show. And they'll talk about the victims, they'll talk about the story, they'll talk about the assailants and the different people involved. And what they're doing with their content is they're actually turning it on its side, because they're not just talking about one crime in particular, they're talking about specific crimes throughout time. Are they just covering like the O.J. Simpson trial? Well, no. Actually, what they're doing is they're going back in time and they're pulling up files that existed 10, 20, 30 years ago and creating a piece of content about that. How can I even prove that without watching or paying attention to their podcast? I've only listened to a couple of episodes. How I can actually prove it to you that I know it is by looking at the backside of how the internet works. And this all ties together. If you can follow this, then you can really make yourself a really great podcast, because this is how it's done. A tool that I use, it's called Ahrefs. And what it does is it allows me to see the Google rankings for a particular website. We can see that they're getting about 128,000 people per month in traffic going to their site, and they have over 19,000 keywords. So that means that there are 19,000 terms, search terms, phrases, and whatnot showing up in Google where Crime Junkie is a result. So that's very important, because when we click on the keywords, we're going to see that they actually rank for a lot of different victim names. For instance, Fiona Yu, Timothy Coggins, Robin Benedict. I have no idea who these people are. However, I could tell you that they show up number 1 in the search results for that keyword. So Robin Benedict, if I were to actually go here and do a Google search for it, we'll see that Crime Junkie is in fact the number 1 result. This is what I'm talking about. They're turning their podcast and their niche on its side, and they're able to go after all these different victims or assailants. As sad as that is what they're doing. And we can actually see that most of the keywords that they're going for are different people's names. So how would you do this for your show? How would you turn your niche on its side? Well, let's say you were doing a podcast about football. Today is Super Bowl Sunday. And if you were trying to figure out a podcast about football, you might put in, and I'm going to leverage ChatGPT for this because AI is freaking awesome for this. You could do this with a free account too. Tell me the top 100 NFL players of the 1990s. Names like Jerry Rice, Barry Sanders, Reggie White. I'm not a football guy, so I don't know who these people are. We're going to say, give me the list just the names, commas in between as a list. That way I could just copy and paste it in. While it runs, I'm just going to impatiently grab some of these because I am an impatient man. Now we could already see these are names that are being searched for tens of thousands of times per month. If you were to put out a piece of content and if your show was about all the different all-star players from the 1990s, you could go through and do an episode about Rich Gannon, Chris Carter, Bruce Smith, Joey Galloway, all these different names, and suddenly you've got yourself a tremendous catalog of content to make. So let's keep going with our example here because I want to show you guys how Joe Rogan does it. Instead of going after crime or after football players, he's actually going after everybody because he has anybody and everybody on his show. So that might mean that he has an influencer like Mr. Beast on. He might have a politician on, many politicians. All of these different people, again, they're all going to show up in Google search for a lot of these different keywords. If you were to turn this on its side again, let's say you wanted to do a podcast about cars, you could list out what are the top 25 car models of the late 2000s. And then you can get a list just based off of that. All right, so we've got our list here, right? How many people you think are looking up the Ford F-150? And more specifically, yes, that's going to be a higher competition keyword. And I'm not asking you to become an SEO expert in this, but I don't believe that you really have to, because when you dig deeper into a niche, whatever it is, even without looking at the data, you will be able to tell that you're digging deeper into that niche. You're going where the competition isn't. That means that you could talk about a very specific model year, trim level. Maybe it's the Ford Raptor. Maybe it's the first Ford Raptor. 2024, 9,000 searches a month, zero competition. I hope you guys are understanding that this is super powerful stuff. So let's quickly recap, right? We're talking about growing a podcast with zero audience. How are we going to do that? We're going to turn our niche on its side. Now, if you don't know what your niche is yet, and you're still trying to figure out what that might be, I would suggest that you look deep down in your heart and figure out what it is that you actually want to talk about. Ask your friends, ask your family, ask anybody around you what it is that they believe that you are interested in, because that is going to give you a lot of perspective if you're really that desperate and you're not sure. Once you have your niche, we're going to turn it on its side. How are we going to do that? We're going to use ChatGPT or some kind of AI out there because this makes it super easy. We've got our method of programmatic / systematic content, podcast distribution. And what is a podcast distribution method? That's going to be some kind of podcast hosting platform. A lot of these platforms exist. You got to choose with what you believe is the best for you. They're different prices. They're all kind of the same. I like Podbean a lot. I've heard very good things from other podcasters about it. Overall, it seems to be a really good platform. But the bottom line is that's going to get you across to all the different directories out there. That's going to get you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. Then what I'm going to look at is social media, what I like to also call fast traffic. If you're just producing your podcast on something like Spotify and Apple, well, I believe that you are hurting your chances of getting found because their search does not work the same as Google search. People are not necessarily looking these things up on Apple Podcasts. Anything other than maybe they'll search for a car or an SUV show. But if you want to show up for something specific where that user, that person is actually actively looking something up and you get to be the number one result, we'll go back to this example here for Rob and Benedict. If somebody's searching for that person and the number one thing is this podcast, there's a very good chance that that person's going to click on it and want to hear the story and if the crime was ever solved, etc. Social media and a website is going to be your fast track method if you want to grow this podcast exponentially and very, very quickly. You're going to distribute your podcast on the regular platforms, and that's going to be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google. Then you're going to do social media. This is the fast traffic. And basically what I'm saying is, yes, you can drop the episode itself on the social media. So that means if you have an hour podcast, you can drop it on social media. Or if you want to do snippets and you want to cut it up and then try to funnel people in that way, you can do that as well. So that could be through YouTube Shorts. First of all, I would say YouTube, big hit. Shorts. Then I would look at TikTok, Instagram. You could look at Rumble. Rumble's an alternative to YouTube. You could look at X/Twitter. I refuse to just call it X. It is and will always be Twitter. You can post it to Reddit. You can post links to the show on Reddit. And what these are going to do is this is going to give you a direct line of traffic directly into your show. And if you're doing it per episode, then you're getting, over time, you're going to be getting yourself a huge surface area of traffic coming to your individual episodes. And if you can do that, you're going to grow very, very quickly. That really is the concept of compound interest working in your favor. The website is going to connect all these dots together. And it really is, but it's a hub and spoke design. It's a wheel. And if you know what a wheel looks like, which I'm sure you do, then you'll see that these things are all connected to the hub. And the hub is going to be your website. All your social media, any incoming links. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to funnel those people right to the blog post about the episode. Super, super important. Every single episode you put out, you will put up a blog post that links to the episode. This gives you a direct way to share the episode. It gets them to your page. You'll see a higher conversion rate of people actually listening to the podcast because they'll be able to read up on it first and then watch. A lot more effective than just posting an episode link. But it's also going to give you a standing for when Google's out there looking for your show, making sure that you show up. We'll go back to the Robin Benedict example because Crime Junkie is doing it so freaking well. Number one is their blog post. We're going to click it. They've got the episode. You could play it right here. You could share it. You could do whatever. You could listen to it on whatever platform you want. Here are the different players in the crime. And then they have all the details of the map, the timeline, all this stuff. And there's probably a very good chance that you're going to listen to this show. We'll see that that page alone, theoretically, is getting about 400 people per month just to the page itself. Pretty awesome. And that is a really good way to growing your podcast. I just want you to understand that this is how the internet works. And if you go to podcastpontifications.com, there's a link in the description. You can opt into my mailing list. I'm going to send you a guide for monetizing your podcast, how to grow traffic, just like we discussed, essentially show notes, and all kinds of other helpful stuff. So if you find any of this helpful, please drop a comment down below. Head on over there right now, and I'll catch you on the next video.